Madam Speaker, I stand before you today filled with immense pride as we reflect on the extraordinary progress our nation has made. The achievements are not just incremental improvements, they are historic breakthroughs that have placed our beloved nation in the strongest economic position ever since gaining independence. The numbers do not just tell a story of improvement, they tell a story of transformation, of an economy that has overcome decades of instability, uncertainty, and crisis to achieve a level of stability, strength, and resilience that Jamaica has never before experienced. Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition and the Opposition spokesman on finance in their presentation attempted to whitewash their record and suggested that analysis of the country's economic performance does not go back far enough to do justice to their contribution. I do not believe they can complain if we start at independence. There are several generations of young people who do not know our modern economic history. There are generations of middle-aged and older Jamaicans who experienced the history but did not quite understand it or have forgotten about it. Then there are those who were the architects of the destructive past. Some quietly and privately admit shame over their actions, but some still try to justify their actions and absolve themselves of responsibility as they battle for your mind. I don't like to dwell on the past, but I find myself having to correct the problems of the past while at the same time dealing with the current challenges and creating new legacies for the future. We cannot lose the battle for the minds of the people of Jamaica. Otherwise, we are at risk of having the people who made the mistakes of the past repeat them. Madam Speaker, let us examine the facts. Let's start with inflation. The table now being displayed shows that the average annual inflation under my administration has been 5.5%, the lowest under any administration since 1972. This is within the inflation target of 4 to 6%, despite the effect of global inflation resulting from the post-COVID supply chain shocks and geopolitical conflicts. Without the post-COVID inflation spike, we could safely project that our average inflation rate would have trended around 4.3%. The period of highest inflation in Jamaica's history was under the PNP administration of 1989 to 2007. During that period, inflation averaged 18.5% per year. Listen to this, resulting in cumulative inflation of 2,249%. A better way to understand it, Madam Speaker, is that in 1980, a loaf of bread cost less than $1. In fact, it costs about 50 cents, somewhere around there. But in 2007, it cost $130. You know how much inflation that is? I'm afraid to say it. I'll leave it up to a smart economist, young economist, to tell us the inflation. It is embarrassing to say. Cumulative inflation in the United States during the same period, 1989 to 2007, was 71.5%, or 2.9% per year. In 1992, Jamaica's inflation rate was nearly 80%. So in 1 year, in a single year, Jamaica had more inflation than the United States had over the same 18 and a half years. Madam Speaker, it is in this period of runaway inflation under the PNP that the starting point of Jamaica's economic woes can be identified. Yes. Yes. Madam Speaker, our current annual rate of inflation is now down to 4.4%, at the lower end of the Bank of Jamaica's target range of 4 to 6%. Through well-managed fiscal and monetary policy, we have brought inflation back down to sustainable levels. My administration has instituted a robust policy of inflation targeting through disciplined monetary policy of the independent central bank, supported by responsible fiscal policies of the central government. We must not allow the failed policies of the PNP to destroy the gains we have made in managing inflation over the decades. Let's look at job creation. Madam Speaker, let us look at the unemployment rate. When the PNP left office in 2016, the unemployment rate was 13.7%. Now the unemployment rate is a historic low of 3.5%, almost full employment. In 2016, the youth unemployment rate was an alarming 32%. Now it is down to 11%. Since 2016, we have created 253,000 new jobs. That's an average of 28,000 new jobs per year. The last PNP administration between 2011 and 2016 created an average of 15,000 jobs per year. Our rate of job creation is nearly twice that of the PNP. Madam Speaker, these are not just statistics. They represent real jobs impacting people, families, and communities. Young people who were once left out of economic opportunities, they now see the door of opportunity opening. Mothers and fathers who struggle to make ends meet are now securing stable employment. Jamaica today has the strongest economy since independence. Jamaica has a bright future. We are not going back to the failed policies of the PNP. Madam Speaker, let's now look at the exchange rate. The table now being displayed shows that during the past 9 years, the Jamaican dollar has depreciated by an average of 2.9% per year relative to the US dollar. This is by far the lowest rate of currency depreciation under any political administration since independence. By contrast, Madam Speaker, the dollar depreciated by an average of 8.5% annually under the last PNP administration. And the worst currency depreciation took place under the PNP administration of 1989 to 2007. When they assumed office in 1989, the exchange rate was 5.51, that's $5.51 Jamaican dollars to $1 US. When they left in 2007, the dollar had fallen to $70.41 to $1 US, a whopping 1,178% depreciation. Madam Speaker, it is this period of foreign exchange volatility under the PNP that is the starting point of Jamaica's economic woes. Jamaica today has the most robust and transparent foreign exchange market in the region and the most stable FX environment since our independence. This stability did not happen by chance. It is the product of sound fiscal and monetary policies. Increased investor confidence and a growing economy that is attracting capital rather than creating capital flight. We must never allow the failed policies of the PNP to destroy what we have built. Madam Speaker, an important factor in achieving sustained currency stability is the country's balance of payment. The balance of payment is like the country's current account. It's our income statement with the rest of the world. It tracks the money flowing in and out of the country from trade, services, and remittances. If the money coming in from exports of goods and services and remittances exceed the money going out to pay for imports of goods and services, the current account is in surplus. That's a positive. And conversely, if the outflows exceed the inflows, the current account is in deficit. Madam Speaker, in 62 years since independence, Jamaica has recorded persistent current account deficits. There have only been 5 years in which we recorded a surplus, and that was in 1963, in 1993, and in 1995, and in that year we had a minor surplus. However, in fiscal year 2022-2023, we recorded a surplus of 1.9% of GDP, and in fiscal year 2023-2024, we recorded a surplus of 3.1% of GDP. The graph now being displayed shows the quarterly current account balances since 2012. It shows that we have recorded a surplus for 7 of the last 8 quarters under this administration. So we are well on track to achieve our 3rd consecutive year of a surplus in the current fiscal year. Jamaica today has the strongest economy since our independence. We are not going back to the failed policies of the PNP. Madam Speaker, our net international reserves now stand at a record high of $5.5 billion, representing 29 weeks of goods and service imports. This provides Jamaica with a crucial buffer against external shocks. In the past, we lived in fear of global financial crises, natural disasters, or commodity price swings that could send our economy into turmoil. Today, we stand prepared and protected with reserves that give us the confidence and security to navigate the uncertainties of the global economy. When my administration took office in 2016, the NIR was less than half what it is today. We have increased the NIR by 131%. And we have done so despite facing the worst global health and economic crisis in 100 years. Jamaica today has the strongest economy since independence, and we will not allow the PNP to have a party with our rent money. Yes, we will not allow the PNP to party with our rent money as the Minister of Finance. Indeed, I have never heard a Minister of Finance make a more apt characterization that the NIR is literally your rent money. And we can't allow anybody to play with that. Madam Speaker, perhaps one of the most remarkable indicators of our economic transformation is our debt-to-GDP ratio, which has fallen from unprecedented levels. When my administration took office, the debt-to-GDP ratio was over 120%. It is now approximately 68.7%, and we are on track to meet our target of 60% by March 2028. It is important, especially for young Jamaicans to understand the roots of our debt crises. Jamaica faced two major periods of debt distress. The first, from the 1970s to the late 1980s. And this was driven by two global oil price shocks, a failed experiment with democratic socialism, a global recession that slashed bauxite revenues, and Hurricanes Allen and Gilbert in 1980 and 1988, respectively. The second period of debt distress, was from the 1990s to the late 2010s. And it stemmed largely from the PMP's policy during the FINSAC era, which collapsed financial institutions, wiped out the business class, and triggered a prolonged recession worsened by the 2008 to 2009 global financial crisis. In the mid-1990s, Jamaica faced a financial sector crisis, which resulted in the collapse of a number of financial institutions. The financial sector meltdown was not caused by any exogenous, meaning outside shocks or global crisis. In fact, the US, our major trading partner, had robust growth in the 1990s, averaging 3.4% per annum. This was purely caused by bad government, bad policy choices, and poor superintendence of the economy. Listen to me clearly, members. FINSAC was a homegrown domestic crisis wholly caused by the PNP, for which we are now only just recovering. Our debt to GDP prior to the advent of the FINSAC crisis was 72%. The government at the time established FINSAC to bail out the collapsed financial institutions. This bailout cost the country 42% of GDP. In other words, 42% of what we produce in any 1 year, we had to take it to pay for FINSAC. By way of comparison, the US government's bailout intervention during the global financial crisis of 2008-2009 was only 9% of their GDP. So you see the magnitude of the scale of FINSAC relative to the size of our economy. Within 6 years after the establishment of FINSAC, our debt spiraled out of control from 72% of GDP to 130% of GDP, almost doubling. That caused interest costs alone on the debt to consume almost 70% of tax revenues. So just the cost to pay for the debt, the interest, at one point cost us 70% of all the tax revenues that we collect. If you add public sector wages to that, and other things that you have to pay for out of tax revenue, then you basically would have no money left. You would have no money left to fix roads, no money left to build schools, no money left to repair clinics, no money left to pay for water. So if you ever wondered, if you ever wondered why we have so much infrastructure that has been left unmaintained and now falling apart, if you ever wondered why things are the way they are, if you ever wondered, Madam Speaker, it's an important point that needs to be made. Because the average man listening might, in the background of the shrill of noise that we hear, this might go way back in their memory. And they see a pothole emerge in a road, and they wonder, why doesn't the government fix that pothole now? But they will never stop and reflect on a very important point, Madam Speaker, that when this road was built 30 or 40 years ago, what should have happened is that there should have been a reserve maintenance programmed into the budget, matched with what they call the engineered life of the road, that as a little crack emerges, out of the revenues that you have, you go and you use some tar chemical and you seal that crack, so no pothole appears. But that road that you are looking at now, that the potholes are all emerging, they weren't maintained. And the reason why they couldn't be maintained is because we had to take almost 70% of our tax revenues to pay for the bad policy choices of the PNP during the 1990s and FINSAC. I want Jamaicans to understand that lack of maintenance accumulates. Lack of spending on infrastructure amounts to what is called disinvestment. So you can build a hospital, you know, but if you don't maintain a schedule of maintenance, the value of that hospital declines, depreciates. So today when you look at the hospital and say, why this government don't do something about it? Even if this government were to take all the money it has now, it couldn't today immediately halt and stop the deterioration. I think the public must understand this. Because, Madam Speaker, it is the same public that voted in the same PNP government over and over and over again. It is a point that needs to be understood, that the economic struggle that the country has had to restore its economy is so that it is able to have revenues steady and stable and predictable that it can then use to maintain and provide the things you want over a long period without making bad decisions to put those revenues in peril. If you want to know what drives me, Madam Speaker, is to make sure that we never go back. So, Madam Speaker, so if you want to know what is the root of our problems today, it is the bad policies of the PNP in the 1990s. Madam Speaker, they don't like to hear this. And 90% of Jamaica may not appreciate and understand it, but we're going to bring the facts.
The members' time for speaking.
There's none. Madam Speaker.
The members' time for speaking.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's time for speaking is expired. I beg to move that his time be extended sufficiently to allow for the completion of his presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Madam Speaker, the root cause of the crisis, the FINSAC crisis, was the premature policy decisions of the PNP to liberalize the foreign exchange market in 1991 without the necessary preconditions such as reserves in place. In other words, they went to party but didn't have any money. This triggered a rapid depreciation of the Jamaican dollar and skyrocketing prices, with inflation reaching 80% in 1991 and 40% in 1992. Not having any rent money to ward off speculators, the government then tried to protect the exchange rate through exorbitant interest rates. As a result, productive enterprises, especially small businesses, were unable to service their loans, and the loans became non-performing. Mounting non-performing loans and loan defaults then caused banks to collapse. Madam Speaker, the PNP's high interest rate policy created a two-tiered economy. One where cash-rich speculators thrived while productive businesses drowned in insurmountable debt. This led to what a prominent member of the PNP described as the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich since slavery. Madam Speaker, who were the beneficiaries of this wealth transfer from the poor to the rich? Is there anyone in this House who was a part of this ill-conceived policy, whose business it was to profit from the great transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich? The fallout was immense. It is estimated that over 40,000 businesses collapsed, wiping out entrepreneurs and leaving thousands destitute. This decimated the manufacturing sector in Jamaica. Burdened with high-cost debt, unable to retool to keep competitive, many factories closed during this period. We recall companies like Thermoplastic, Highgate Food Products, Home Electrics, and others too numerous to name that could not survive the inhospitable climate that FINSAC created. Madam Speaker, those who formed the government that presided over this economic debacle have never apologized or even expressed any remorse. Worse, they have the audacity to lecture this administration on how to run an economy. For the next 20 years after the PNP inflicted FINSAC, the FINSAC shock, we basically just meandered along as a country with no attempt to fix the real problem. Our debt situation was already unsustainable when the global financial crisis hit in 2008-2009, and that took the country to the verge of bankruptcy. The real attempt at grappling with high debt, high interest rate, this vicious cycle created by the PNP, started with the Bruce Golding-led administration of 2007 to 2011. Indeed, we fathered the deep structural reforms needed to break the PNP-created debt crisis. The debt inherited from the PNP had reached unsustainable levels, and it was under the leadership of Bruce Golding and Audley Shaw Manayard supported by enlightened and patriotic members of the private sector and reasonable unions that the first structured debt exchange was engineered, JDX. This pulled Jamaica from the brink of another financial collapse by successfully reducing Jamaica's interest costs, extending debt maturity, improving debt sustainability, and giving the country the credibility to approach the IMF. We put in place the fiscal responsibility framework, which enhanced transparency, accountability, and reporting on public finances and placed limits on the fiscal deficit. This was the basis for the fiscal rule legislation and all the other reforms we have today. We took tough steps to divest loss-making public entities such as the Sugar Company and Air Jamaica, which under the PNP racked up huge debts and operating losses carried over from the 18.5 years of poor management and lack of superintendence of public bodies. And when we were the opposition, we did our part in supporting and developing many nascent measures, including working assiduously on every piece of legislation required to meet the IMF timelines. I gave direct instructions to my members of the House and the Senate that we must not hold up any of the IMF bills. We were a responsible and constructive father, even in opposition. We acted in the interest of Jamaica's economic recovery. In everything we did, we chose Jamaica over narrow political partisan gain. No one on this side said that the PNP did not contribute to the national effort to restructure and reform the economy and bring down the debt. As recently as November last year at the launch of our Next Chapter policy pivot, I said, and I quote, "Let me express my deepest gratitude to all who played a role in this transformation. Leaders from both sides of the political aisle, business leaders, our civil service, unions, members of civil society, and most importantly, the people of Jamaica. I want to specially recognize and thank the Honorable Bruce Golding, former Prime Minister. The Most Honorable Portia Simpson-Miller, former Prime Minister. The member, Madam Speaker. Yeah, Madam Speaker. There's a running joke between myself and the member from East Kingston and Port Royal. You know, he is her adopted first son, and I am her adopted and reclaimed second son. You remember I was disowned for a little period of time. But the member from East Kingston and Port Royal know that we made up. So it was very easy for me, with no malice or ill feeling or ill will, to acknowledge the work and contribution of the Most Honorable Portia Simpson-Miller. The Honorable Peter Phillips, former leader of the opposition and Minister of Finance. Dudley Manayard Shaw, former Minister of Finance. Nigel Clark, former Minister of Finance. Richard Biles, Governor of the Bank of Jamaica and former Chairman of the Economic Policy Oversight Committee, EPOC. Keith Duncan, who took over as Chairman of EPOC after Mr. Biles. All the members, and I'm eternally and always grateful to all the members of the National Partnership Council. But most of all, I want to thank the people of Jamaica for their patience, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Jamaica's turnaround would have been impossible without the willingness of the Jamaican people to endure the hardships that they had to bear. This is my public statement for the public record as to how we on this side characterize this period of economic recovery. So this falls with an attempt at whitewashing history. This kind of revisionism is unnecessary, indeed undignified. Let me give a fair and balanced characterization of the historical development of the Jamaican economy. The PNP, through bad policy decisions, created the second debt crisis. They created the first one as well. The JLP took the first fundamental steps to address the problem. The PNP contributed and built on those steps, and the JLP further built on those steps and completed the reforms. While we acknowledge the work of the PNP in the national effort across administrations, any political credit they should get for contributing to the solution is totally wiped out because they are the ones whose bad policy caused the problem in the first place. To their true bipolar nature, the PNP wants to claim paternity after causing the mother, the people, so much hardship. In their last budget presentation, the leader of the opposition and the opposition spokesman on finance disingenuously accused the government of increasing taxes on the people of Jamaica. In this budget presentation, well, in the last budget presentation, the leader of the opposition said, since the JLP government came into office, they have more than doubled the annual tax take, increasing it by a massive $190,000 per person. Yet, in his recent budget presentation this year, the leader of the opposition and the opposition spokesman on finance both claim that the improved performance of tax revenue is due to the tax reform work of the PNP. So we need to ask ourselves, is it the PNP that is responsible for Jamaicans paying more taxes? In the 2023 budget, the leader of the opposition complained that the government was moving too fast to reduce debt. He advocated that we abandon the fiscal responsible path, use $40 billion, in other words, go and party with the rent money. Money that we're supposed to use for debt repayment to spend on temporary relief. In this budget, when he sees the amazing benefit of reducing the debt to 68% and the amazing fiscal space that is created for us to actually do sustainable deal with the relief effort, he now comes claiming that the reduction in debt is due to the PNP's faithfulness to fiscal prudence. This reminds me of the classic tale of what we in Jamaica sometimes regretfully call buttless father, who caused the mother so much pain and then abandons the child. But when the child grows up to be successful, out of the blue they turn up to claim paternity and associate with success. This leader of the opposition is a man of convenience, flip-flopping between prudence and popularity when it suits him. 1 minute he disowns the child of fiscal discipline, and then the next he claims the child of fiscal discipline. The mother remembers the pain of FINSAC and the high interest rate policy, the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, and she knows that she cannot trust this worthless man. So the DNA test was done. The DNA test was done. The results are in. When it comes to 15-year-old fiscal discipline, PNP, you are not the father.
You're not the father.
Yes, your name call, but it is another goaling that is the father. Madam Speaker, jokes aside, this is the first time our debt to GDP ratio is below pre-FINSAC levels of the mid-1990s. It has therefore taken us 30 years to undo the damage of the self-inflicted blow of the PNP's economic mismanagement of the 90s. 30 years.
30 years.
Madam Speaker, the graph now being displayed shows interest costs as a percentage of tax revenues in the mid-1990s during the FINSAC period. Interest costs as a percentage of tax revenues climbed rapidly, peaking at nearly 70% in the midst of the global financial crisis between 2008 to 2009, and it peaked again, to about 71% and started to decline thereafter. The successful 2010 Jamaica debt exchange to 30.5% in 2016 when this administration took the reins of government. And as of this budget, very important, Madam Speaker, as of this budget, Mr. Speaker rather, only 18.7% of tax revenues will go towards paying interest on debt. Mr. Speaker, this shows why we must always maintain fiscal discipline. From having to pay 71% of tax revenues to having now paid down the debt, we only are going to be paying 18.7%. We have all of that fiscal space created that we can now actually spend on giving relief to the people of Jamaica in a sustainable way. So this is the result, let's just be clear, This is the result of not spending the $40 billion on temporary relief, but sticking to the discipline of paying down the debt. The interest on the debt is now smaller, which gives more room to spend sustainably on the things that matter to you, like social housing, increasing the income tax exemption threshold, installing water supply, and buying new buses over the last 9 years. It's a funny thing, you know, Madam Speaker, and I think Jamaicans are, Mr. Speaker, and I think Jamaicans are coming to the understanding now that you have people who will say, I will spend this money on you because I care about you, without looking on the sustainability, whether or not that expenditure makes sense. And people who are suffering don't look behind the popularity promise. All they think it sounds good and it's going to give me immediate gratification. But what it does is to create a long-term immiseration. Because you can only spend that money once. And it didn't really help you. And so you have to come back again. And so you end up in a dependency. And then that dependency, when not fulfilled, ends up in disappointment. And then people say, I can't bother with politics. Yes. This struggle that we have gone through to move our debt from as high as 140% of GDP to now 68% of GDP, and to reduce our debt servicing ratio to tax revenues from 71% to 18%, is a symbol of struggle and sacrifice. It is. But it is also putting us in a different place where each Jamaican must be vested in ensuring that whoever is the government, whichever government, that we maintain this path, because this is the only way to truly and really care for you. That's the only way, my Jamaican brothers and sisters, to care for you. We can't care for you by taking the money that we should pay down debt and spend it. We can't care for you by taking our reserves that keep the foreign exchange rate stable and go party with it. That's not how we care. How we care is to manage the government responsibly. Don't make bad policy decisions. Be frugal and prudent so that we secure long-term revenues for which we can make long-term investment in your future. This government genuinely cares for you. You think I don't have the struggles on this side to be reckless? You think I don't have the struggles of people getting nervous and seeing, oh God, look at what is happening, you have to spend money? You think I don't have those struggles?
Run with it.
But I don't run with it, Madam Speaker. I don't run with it. And you know why, Madam Speaker? Because, you know, I pass the stage of trying to be in a popularity game.
Thank you. Do what has to be done.
So I am not going to go do reckless things for popularity. Madam Speaker, I do it for the love, not for the likes. There is a direct and inextricable link between good economic management and our ability to fix our roads, build hospitals and healthcare centers, build new schools, buy new buses and garbage trucks, provide communities with water, invest in irrigation, and support our farmers. In other words, Madam Speaker, good economic management can yam. Good economic management produces dividends for the citizens who are shareholders in Jamaica Inc. They have invested their hopes and trust into our government, and they expect that their government will be good stewards of the talents.